So now just to finish up what we were previously talking about in terms of sexual life cycles and its relationship to meiosis, in our previous video we established the variety of sexual life cycles. We looked at the idea of humans having the sexual life cycle that involved the gamete, and the gamete being the only multicellular, haploid cell within that life cycle. The gamete is the only haploid cell during that life cycle. But what we also notice is that there's no multicellular haploid stage within this life cycle, within a human or most animals' life cycle. We saw the difference in plants. Plants also had haploid life cycle, but they had a haploid and diploid multicellular stages. And those were established when we looked at the sporophyte and the gametophyte. We're going to finish off our discussion on the variety of sexual life cycles by just looking at the last version of it. That would be, let's say, most fungi and also some protists. So these organisms undergo just a bit of a different sort of variety in terms of their sexual life cycle. What happens in them is very simple. What we're going to first state is that the gametes fuse. We're very familiar with this, and we know how to already represent this by doing n plus n. That's the fusion of gametes, giving us what? Giving us a zygote. That's the fusion of gametes, giving us a fertilized fertilized egg, and that's going to give us a 2n organism. What's going to happen is this is going to create a single-celled zygote. So we'll write single-celled zygote. And now that we have a single-celled zygote, we can form haploid cells from this single-celled zygote. This formation of haploid cells is done through the process of meiosis. So write down meiosis over there. But what we're going to state about this single-celled zygote stage is that this is actually the only diploid stage, the only 2n stage of this organism. After this, it's going to be at the haploid stage, and it's going to be at this haploid cell stage. These haploid cells now have this opportunity, depending on the organism, specifically depending on the type of fungus or the type of protist, to do two things. To either become a multicellular offspring or become the opposite, which would be a unicellular, let's say, offspring. But the commonality between both of these is that they can be, or they will be, in the end stage for this part of their life. As offspring, they will be in the haploid stage. The only time they're in their diploid stage, is during this single-celled zygote stage. But through meiosis, let's remember that's what this whole lecture is about, we turn into a haploid stage. That haploid stage then has the opportunity, depending on the type of fungus or the type of protist you're studying, to either go into a unicellular haploid offspring or a multicellular haploid offspring. These gametes are both going to be produced actually now by mitosis. So gametes produced by mitosis. These are the gametes that are going to be produced by mitosis. And this is only seen in this type of organism, this type of, let's say, these types of organisms, the fungi or the protists that are specific to this type of sexual life cycle. When you want to get from this haploid cell stage to this multicellular or unicellular offspring, this process is through mitosis both ways. So on this arrow would be mitosis and on this arrow would be mitosis. So that's just a label. Make sure we understand where the labeling is coming from. The overall sort of thing you want to understand about this sexual life cycle is that there is no multicellular 2n stage. There's no multicellular diploid stage. I think that's the most important thing to come out with from the fungi and the protist type of sexual life cycle. We notice a multicellular diploid stage in humans. That's most of our life. All of our cells are in this multicellular or diploid stage. Only our gametes are haploid, and plants undergo the alternation of generations, in which sometimes they can be multicellular haploid or multicellular diploid depending on sporophyte or gametophyte. But what we notice in this one, in fungi and protists, is that there is absolutely no multicellular diploid stage. And so overall, we see the difference between this and the humans and the plant sexual life cycle. Overall, what we want to understand about sexual life cycles as a whole is that whenever you see meiosis, you actually have to notice that if you go back and look at the humans and the plants and the fungi and the protists, you look at each of their sexual life cycles, you will notice that absolutely only when the cell is in a diploid state, so only diploid cells are the only cells that can undergo meiosis. This is a key driving point of this part of the lecture on meiosis itself. Sexual life cycles, specifically the ones that contain diploid stages, anytime you have a diploid cell, that is the only type of cell that can undergo meiosis. In addition, both N and 2N, both haploid and diploid cells, can do mitosis. That's fine. They can both undergo mitosis. You'll notice that within the sexual life cycles that we've done, but you'll definitely only see meiosis happening anytime there's a diploid cell, never during a haploid cell. And that's because meiosis is all about what? To make smaller. Whenever you have a diploid cell, the whole idea about mitosis is to make that sort of chromosome number, let's say, that overall genetic information smaller, because it's going to be in anticipation for, let's say, a fertilization event, or in anticipation for a zygote forming, for the union of gametes, let's say. So overall, this defines our sexual life cycles that we've seen in humans, plants, and some species of plants, and some algae, some fungi, and some protists. Overall, we have a better understanding of what sexual life cycles are, and now we can get into the specific phases of meiosis.